You're listening to Filter Free America.
Well, Filter Free America is where I wanna be. Driving on the shining black shores of oil soap Lady Liberty, where justice not just blind, but deaf, dumb, and unkind. Thank God I'm filter free. It's Filter Free America.
Motherfucker!
Hello, Filter Free America podcast listeners. Welcome back to the Filter Free America podcast. As always, I am so happy you are here. Let's talk about the episode. It's a little bit of a longer one, so let's jump right into it. My guest this episode is Bradley Mahar. And Bradley is a heroin addict in recovery, and holy shit, does he have a story. Starting with a doctor-supplied prescription of painkillers at the age of 16 years old, Bradley became addicted. That addiction progressed to heroin use, and he spent many hundreds of thousands of dollars feeding his habit. You will learn about his story, and you will get a filterless look at the life of an addict. Some of the topics that we cover are overdose deaths, buying black tar heroin off CraigsList. You'll learn about fentanyl and why it's so dangerous. And you're also going to learn how Bradley embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from a company to buy drugs and much, much more. There is even a story that involves Scientology. I'm not going to tell you anything more than that, but I will tell you it's going to melt your fucking brain. Real fast, let me mention the sponsor of the Filter Free America podcast, and that is simplewebsite.us. 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 The Squarespace website builder. That's right. They make building a website on Squarespace even easier for you by doing all the work, right? Who doesn't want that? If you're like me and you have difficulties using the computer and whatnot, sometimes you need a little bit of help, even if it's something like Squarespace that's supposed to be designed for you to do on your own. Well, just go to simplewebsite.us. Go to their website right now, check it out, and see how they can help you build a fantastic website using the Squarespace website builder. If you'd like to see an example of the website that they can build, please go to the Filter Free America website. That's filterfreeamerica.com, filterfreeamerica.com, and you will see the website that they build and maintain for us here at the Filter Free America podcast. Looks really good. And if you don't want them to build your website completely, you can even go to them for a little bit of help. Say you've already got a Squarespace website started, you just want to improve it a little bit, fix something you can't figure out, they'll be more than happy to look at that too. So go to simplewebsite.us and support the true blue sponsor of the Filter Free America podcast. Lastly, please make sure you subscribe and rate and review Filter Free America. If you enjoy the show, the only thing I'll ever charge you to listen to it is just for you to take the time to make sure you're subscribed, make sure you leave a strong rating and a nice review. Only takes a few words to say something nice about the podcast. So please do that for me, especially if you're on iTunes, because iTunes are the most important thing in the world of podcasts, apparently. That's what I've learned. That's what I've been told. Anyway, let's kick off this episode. Like I said, it's a little bit longer than some of the episodes, but it's packed full of excitement and content and human tragedy, to be honest. But here we go. Let's kick this episode off. My opioid and heroin addiction story with Bradley Mahar, right here on Filter Free America. Let's go.
The odds are right now you probably know someone who is struggling or who has died from an opioid addiction.
I'm going to rehab tomorrow and I'm going to stay.
Some heroin mixed with the powerful drug fentanyl.
Heroin was introduced by Bayer as a non-addictive alternative to morphine.
One of the ones that disturbs me the most is fentanyl.
heroin, and prescription painkillers.
The face of the epidemic.
I think the story is going to start back to your early golfing career in school, and this kind of stemmed from an injury related to that. So kind of give me you're 16 years old. What are you doing in life? What sport are you playing? What's going on before the addiction?
All right, so I grew up in a small town, Williston, North Dakota.
Very small town.
Population 10,000. Grew up, and golf was always my major passion in life. So, I mean, that was my major focus at that point.
Is golf a big thing in North Dakota? Is that was just there for you, or?
Well, surprisingly, like 25 miles from my hometown, we have a top 100 course in the nation.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, we actually had a great place to practice and play, but
there's plenty of space out there for
other
golf
than
courses.
That, and North Dakota in itself has the most golf courses per capita.
No shit.
In the United States, but I think that's just because it's a lot of old people and such a small population. So
a lot of old rich oil money out there now. So they need something to do.
No, a lot of oil money.
Yeah.
But so I was right around 16. I was in high school. I was playing golf. That's kind of what I was focused on. Had been to a few world championships, and
so you weren't just golfing. You were golfing at a high level. You were.
I mean, I was trying to.
Right.
that was the goal, was to get to the next level.
Were you at that skill level where there was a potential for a professional career?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so when I was 16, I started having back issues, and it was something that kind of it came on really mild, actually. Like, it was just a sore back every now and then, which I feel like everybody has faced. So
was this kind of you said we're going to find out the doctors really didn't know specifically, but was this like a repetitive motion related type thing?
See, I'm not really sure if it was golf related, or at the same time I was doing some mixed martial arts training.
Okay.
So again, I always say that I don't know exactly what caused it or brought it on.
Could have been a combination of the two.
It could have been anything to me,
Right.
It ended up getting worse and worse. I started doctoring for it, and then after it got to the point where it was really getting miserable and affecting my day-to-day life, when I was 16, my junior year of high school, I was put on narcotics. And
so you went to a doctor, a regular doctor?
Yeah, just a normal family physician.
Okay.
Is who started me on it.
And I just want to clarify, because this is kind of an important thing just for kind of how these issues start. Regular general practitioner, doctor.
Yep, general
his solution
practitioner
was to put you on narcotics.
Yep.
That's terrifying.
Yep. Just a normal family doctor.
Because they'll give them. Like, I've gone for. I think I'm trying to think of the last time I got a pain pill. Like, I think I fell off a bike and strained my back. It wasn't like an injury. Nothing was broken. And then they wanted to give me, was it Percocets or maybe the Vicodin?
Vicodin, hydrocodone.
We'll give you some Vicodin. I was like, no, I don't need Vicodin. I just fell off a bike. I want to.
And especially back.
I want to give it to you.
All right, and this was in 2010, which the opioid epidemic had definitely started, but it wasn't
mainstream
anything like it was today.
Uh-huh.
So I got on them, and I took them as prescribed for the longest time, but.
And what were you prescribed?
Well, at that time, I was just prescribed, I believe, 60 hydrocodone a month. So, like 2 of them a day.
How many milligrams?
10 milligrams.
10 milligrams.
So Vicodin, 10 milligrams, hydrocodone, Norco, all the same thing. It's all hydrocodone and acetaminophen, depending on. Some will be 325 milligrams of acetaminophen. Some will be 600, just depending on the specific name brand or generic.
Right. Were they prescribed as needed, or like you take it at this time of day?
Yep. No, as needed. It
Okay.
was 60 of them as needed. But as a 16-year-old, I took that as 60 of them. There's 30 days in a month. I take 2 a day.
Right.
And so I was taking 2 a day, and 2 pills a day isn't much. And then
Did the doctor, when you first prescribed them to you, was there any conversation about, hey, these are fucking crazy addictive drugs?
no, nothing.
No education.
Nothing at that time.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I mean, there was no conversation at all, actually.
Which makes me think, it's like, I wonder.
I guarantee now there would be, in today's day and age, there would be.
So I'm wondering, I don't know what the consensus was of doctors across the country in 2010, but I wonder if they maybe didn't appreciate the seriousness. I mean, they had to understand what they were prescribing, but...
Well, and again, I feel like the new school doctors around that time definitely... I mean, again, this was in part of the opioid epidemic, but it was, at the forefront of it. So I feel like the younger doctors at that time, because I noticed throughout the years after that, when I go and I'd see a different doctor and they'd be a younger doctor, they'd be a lot more reluctant to write narcotics.
The younger ones.
Yep, but the older doctors would be a lot more relaxed. So I took them as prescribed, but after... I mean, within the first, 5 months, I had a day where I didn't take them for a couple of days, and I realized, man, I'm really irritable. And I mean, at that time, 20 milligrams of hydrocodone or Vicodin, that's essentially nothing. And, in the addicts world, that's really nothing. But so
Can you describe that? You said irritable is... And what you're feeling, I guess, is kind of like the first pings of addiction coming in.
Yes.
What is that feeling like?
Well, it was essentially, if there are any addicts listening or anything like that, the first few withdrawal symptoms that you get were what I suffered then. So it'd be like I got the runny nose and the extremely anxious, and just, you feel like your skin is crawling. At that low of amount, I didn't suffer, vomiting or diarrhea or anything, but just extremely irritable. And I knew right away what it was from. And I kind of continued on that way. And then I was dealing with all this pain, and one of my really good buddies was like, what helps these a lot more? It'll work a hell of a lot better if you snort it. And, being at that time 17 years old, I'm like, oh, yeah, of course, let's try it, right. And then basically from then on, I started snorting it. And then
we're still talking about the prescription.
Yep, still talking about prescription. And then...
Are you using at the same prescribed rate, the 2 a day average?
Yep, at that time, I was still taking it as prescribed. I was just snorting them when I took it.
Does that change how long the prescription lasts? Because I'm assuming it's a quicker and more potent rush when you snort it. So does that mean you're crushing that pill? You're going to get multiple lines out of that pill? Is that?
I would do the whole pill at once, and I mean I was taking in so much Tylenol too at the time, which I'll get to more later. But yeah, so I was still doing the 2 a day, and then I finish up high school, and I'm still basically just doing my prescription. And then I go to college, at Bemidji State on a golf scholarship, which that in itself was a little bit disappointing, because as an athlete, you want to play Division I, right. But I wasn't the best student by any means, so I didn't have the grades or the classes to play Division I. So, and I wasn't going to go sit out, so I signed to a Division II school. And I love BSU. I still love Bemidji to this day. It's one of my favorite towns. But I get there, and basically once I got there, my back gives out. and I'm not able to play at that time. I'm not able to basically do anything. I'm missing class most of the time. So I just kind of, obviously when you're depressed and you're in that mindset, that's when the addiction kind of kicked up a bit.
This is where you're start using beyond the recommended.
Yep. And I mean, I was still doing my prescription, but then it was like I was doing my prescription and I was doing, doing another dorm buildings of prescription stuff. And then, so the whole time there, my addiction just kept progressing. And then by the time freshman year ended, my back was at the point where I was going anywhere to doctors to figure out what was wrong. I went to neurosurgeons in Montana, and I went to Mayo Clinic a number of times. And I went to some guys here in Minneapolis. Like, I was going anywhere just to get answers. And everywhere I went gave me a different answer. I'd go to one doctor and they'd say that I had a degenerative disc disease, and then I'd go to another doctor and he'd tell me something else. And they'd both want to do surgery, but both would be for two totally different things. And you get so many mixed things that I wasn't going to let any of them do anything because each doctor says something totally different.
Right.
I wanted at least two of them to be on the same page. And then,
this doesn't really distract from the story, but today, right now, are you recovered now, or did they ever figure out what it is, or?
It progressively got better, which was, a blessing. I don't know what's going to happen, tomorrow or 5 years from now.
Are you able to golf today without pain?
Yep. I'm able to golf today, not without pain, but I'm able to golf, and most days it's not too bad. It's something that I still feel it every day. It still hurts, but after what I went through, it's not something that I'm not able to deal with.
Gotcha.
So
you're going and getting all these different opinions of what needs to be done, and while you're still trying to figure it out, you're still just consuming pills. Are you're storing them, you're not using them correctly, and you're using beyond your prescription.
Yep, I'm using my prescription and getting them from whoever else I can. And then I decide that summer.
Have you came to grips with it at least in your own mind? Are you telling yourself, I'm addicted to pain pills at this point?
Yep, I knew. Like I mentioned, I knew that I was addicted very early on. Okay. When I was still taking 2 a day as prescribed by mouth, a few months in, I went a few days without. And that's when I realized what withdrawal symptoms were. And I realized that that's what it was. And I knew that I was, at that point anyways, I knew that I was physically addicted.
Right.
I guess I wasn't so sure about mentally addicted. But by the time I started snorting them after that, I knew I was addicted. And then after freshman year, I go back home to Williston, and I take that summer to kind of, recuperate, figure out what I'm going to do, because I can't golf. I can't do anything. And it just, that's when it totally spirals out of control. That August is when I was introduced to, as most people call them, blues, but 30 milligram oxycodone pills, or Roxys, as a lot of people call them. Pure 30 milligram oxycodone pills. And once I was introduced to them is when it kind of skyrocketed again.
So that's a substantially just more potent form?
Yeah, well, it's so at that time, and I forgot to mention, my doctor increased the prescription as we went on. By the time I went to college, I was being prescribed 180 Percocet 10s, or 10 milligram oxycodone, and 45 Dilaudid 4 milligrams. a month.
Every month.
Yes,
Drop it
which
off.
is something that, most cancer patients don't see. So obviously, that prescription would last, at that time it would last maybe 10 to 14 days at the most. And then I discovered the 30 milligram blues and got into those heavily. And it just, that snowball effect kind of started all over again, as it did when I was in school.
Did you have any scary moments early in your addiction? As things progress, we'll get into more intense interaction and stuff, but did you have any near overdoses or times like, whoa, I did a little too much there, or anything at that time?
Early in my addiction, I really didn't, because I don't want to say I was smart by any means, but I was always very cautious. Mm-hmm. And at the time, when doing those pills, those are still, in the scope of addiction, those are still very, not very potent pills. And so I'd always try to do like the least I could to get by, and then I'd maybe up that a little bit and a little bit more. So I never had any close calls really until I started shooting up, which was a while after that.
Okay. Now, eventually you get to the point where you already knew that you were becoming addicted to these pills.
Right.
And then you get to a point where you go and talk to the doctor about that, right? Is that just all on your own, or did anything trigger you to want to have that conversation?
So I actually came down here to the Twin Cities to go to like a 3-week rehab, not a drug rehab, but it was a rehab for my back, right?
Okay.
And while I was there, I didn't make it through the whole rehab, but when I was there, I actually decided to call my doctor and, tell him, hey, I'm addicted to these pills. And basically he said, all right, okay, we won't give them to you anymore. And that was essentially that.
To clarify, because we talked about this before we started recording, that was it. I mean, he didn't offer any strategy for taking you down. No.
At that time, I was with other doctors in that rehab, but I had dealt with him, another time much later on than this, where I basically said the same thing, except this time I was trying to come off heroin, and I was like, hey, I need something to deal with withdrawals so I can be detoxed and go to rehab or something. And
was there ever a point, and this is jumping probably way ahead, but was there ever a conversation that you ever had with this original doctor that kind of put you on this path here? Did he ever say, I'm sorry, I wish I wouldn't have done that? Was there any acknowledgement of hey, you're the doctor, you should? And
I've heard so many times, like, hey, what doctor gives an 18-year-old kid 180 oxys and 45 Dilaudid? And I see that side of it, and a lot of people, are like, why didn't you, sue? Like, that's malpractice. And I definitely, I see that side of it, but at the same time, I don't fault him one bit, because anybody that knew me at that time, I was in so much pain, I was so miserable. He was just at a loss of what to do. Okay. And yes, I don't think that it was the right thing to do, but what else was he to do, really? I mean, you see an 18-year-old come in that's getting pushed in on a wheelchair by his mom and is damn near in tears and pain from a back injury that you guys have no idea what's causing it. So I can't really fault him for that. But
I would at least hope that maybe he learned something from this. And
I'm sure he definitely did.
Has changed.
Yeah, I'm sure tactics. He definitely did.
So after they stopped doing the prescription, what steps did you take, either with a professional or independently, to try to clean yourself up? Or
really
did you?
none.
Okay.
At that point, when I told them that, it was a lot of addicts get this thing where usually when they're high too, where they, get this bright idea that I'm going to get clean. I'm going to do it this time. And then a couple hours later when they come down, they don't want to be clean anymore.
Right.
And that's kind of what I was dealing with at that time. And I was in that rehab scenario that I didn't finish. I left shortly after that. Yep, the physical rehab. That I left shortly after that. And then so as soon as I got home, I was like, man, fuck. I just, ditched that. And granted, at that time, it was only lasting like a week, but it was like, still, I had... at that point, a pretty hefty pill habit, like, saves you a lot of money to have, at least a week of it covered. Right. So that's when I started buying off the streets, and that was June 2014. And I was buying off the streets before that, but I mean, at this point, that's all where it was.
So take me through your first illegal pill purchase. Did you already have somebody that you knew was in the game? Did you have to look around? How hard was it for you to find somebody willing to sell you illegally pills?
Well, my first illegal pill purchase was high school, I'm sure. And it was just, and in high school, I was never a druggie or anything like that. I smoked a little bit of pot, but other than that, I was pretty against drugs. I never drank. I never did anything like that. But it was just at that time, it was like I smoked a little bit of pot, and that was when I was, taking a couple of them a day, and it was just my friend had some. So it was, it wasn't a big deal at all for the first one. It definitely got a little bit different as time went on, and I met some other characters.
Right.
But yeah, the first one wasn't.
Let's take a break here and then talk kind of what we talked about before about what is drug culture, drug community like in Williston.
I mean, most places. You'd think that it'd be, close-knit because it's such a small community.
You said, what, about 10,000 is the normal population?
When I was growing up, it was 10,000. Right now, because of the boom, it hovers around 25,000, 30,000.
Right. So your population has basically tripled. And
at one time, it was about 50 with... people in their trailers and whatnot.
And when he's talking about boom, he's talking about the oil industry.
Yep, oil industry. But yeah, I mean, you'd think for a small community, it'd be pretty close-knit, but I mean, I guess it was, but it really wasn't because, again, the oil industry, you got a lot of transients and a lot of... people who come and they sell drugs for a week and then they go back home, or people that come up, they work for a week and do drugs and then they go back home.
Right. Tell about the cost versus like if making a purchase here in the city versus a purchase in Wilson, the rise in prices.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm not so proud of. But okay, yeah, so anywhere else, and I'm just gonna kind of skip towards the end here and go with heroin prices.
Okay.
So most places, you could go, and I don't know exactly Minneapolis, for example, but most places you can get a gram of heroin for probably 60 to $80.
Right.
Okay. I know places in Denver where I could get an ounce of heroin for like $800, 800 to 1,000, depending on who I was dealing with. And now in Williston, they'd sell a gram of heroin for $300, and that's even like that's getting the good price because people always want to point it out.
Right.
So they'd sell you a point for $50.
And a point is
a tenth of a gram.
Tenth of a gram. Okay.
Which a lot of people a lot of people consider a point as like a unit of measurement for shooting up. Like, consider a point as like a dose.
Okay.
Which
And the reason for these high prices is geography, because Wilson is a small
middle
town.
Middle of nowhere, and then the money, because everybody out there is making a lot of money.
Right.
So, which is where my next problem came in.
This is just because I wanted to make a nod to it. This is just one of those when we talk about these oil companies going into areas and they're bringing some profit in there. This is one of the usually unmentioned side effects.
Absolutely.
Is when these industries come in and you bring in a transient community, like you said.
Absolutely.
And they're trying to get any kind of able-bodied person to do these jobs. A lot of these people are bringing drugs with them, bringing addictions with them. So your small town community lifestyle can be greatly altered by not only just oil and maybe possible pollution issues, but also
exactly
drugs
that. Because I mean, you get people, and it's a small town where there's nothing going on, and then you get people with extra cash, and now you got people bringing drugs in, and these guys got extra cash with nothing to do on a Friday, and it. Again, it doesn't start out with them banging heroin. It starts out with them, buying a Percocet or an Oxy from them, and then
or getting hurt while working.
Or exactly, getting hurt while working. It's amazing how fast things can go downhill.
So your illegal purchasing and buying off the street, that kind of rapidly progressed.
Yeah, absolutely. So
rapidly progressed beyond your financial means.
Yeah, way beyond my financial means and everybody else's. So again, after I came back from that physical rehab, I started, buying strictly the 30 milligram oxycodone off the street. And I mean, right away I couldn't afford it. But then by the time September rolled around, I was doing, at that August is when I started switching to IV use. Okay. And then by the time September rolled around, I was...
So you went from pills, oral pills, to crushing and snorting.
Yeah.
And now
now I'm shooting them at that point.
What triggered that? Was that kind of like another friend who said, "Hey, there's a better way to do it"? What led you to that progression?
Yep, that's exactly it. I was doing so many of these Roxy 30s, as they're called, and I was spending so much money, I couldn't afford it, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And for the
Are you comfortable telling me what an average dollar amount was?
So at this time, it ended up getting to the point where I was spending $2,000 a day.
Jesus Christ!
At this point,
I was expecting 800,000.
Yeah,
Jesus
most
Christ.
people aren't.
You know how many snakes I could buy with $2,000 a day?
Yeah,
Holy
probably
shit.
a lot.
Holy shit!
You get to see a bunch of.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, so at the end of it, before I switched to heroin, it was $2,000 a day. At this point, when I first started shooting, it was probably $1,000 a day.
Okay. And that's not because you did any less; it's because it's more affordable.
No, I was doing less when I first started shooting.
Oh, because the potency displaced the amount. Is that?
No, it was more so I started shooting, and initially I started doing a little bit less because I was shooting them.
Okay.
But then that went out the window, and tolerance builds again, and you start doing more and more again. But so when I started shooting pills, I was doing 20 of these Roxy 30s a day, which I've talked to doctors before and, said like, oh, I do 15 of them a day. And they'd sit and look at me and they'd think that I was lying to get drugs and say that that's not humanly possible. You'd be dead.
Right. Which again, that speaks towards the year that this was happening. Like nowadays, there's
the
more
naivety. The naivety of these doctors, because I mean, if the money's there, or if you have not even the money, but if you have the means to let a tolerance build for opiates, it will build until the end of time.
Right.
There's no ends to it. So I started shooting up because my buddy, I kept hearing for the last couple months, like, hey, you're spending $1,000 a day right now on this. Like, you could save so much money if you just shot it up. It'd last a lot longer. And I was like, oh yeah. So the first time I shot up, I wasn't even just trying it. I knew that, like, this was what I was going to do from now on. Like, this is how I'm going to do it. Show me how to do it, and let's go. I need,
Tell me, well, I'm going to ask you a couple of things. Tell me first, what was the difference between the first time you shot it and the reaction you were getting when you were just snorting it? Can you describe either the euphoricness, the degree of pleasure?
Yeah.
What's all going on in your mind?
So the first time I shot up was a Roxy 30, and now the difference between like snorting and shooting heroin was a huge difference. And it was a huge difference between snorting and shooting Roxys as well. But
is one better than the other as far as enjoyment or whatever benefit? Heroin's actually better.
Roxys are very well known as they don't have much of a rush. So it's like you shoot them and yeah, you feel good right away and you feel great. But it's like heroin and Dilaudid, especially Dilaudid, is very well known as having that euphoric rush. Both of those are.
So would I be right to say that with the pill version, it's a slow build to your comfort zone versus heroin is immediate?
Not a slow build to your comfort zone. It's just more mild all throughout, I guess. Okay. Whereas heroin, shoot it and it's immediate and it comes on strong and then kind of mellows out, after 20, 30 minutes, and then you're high for however long between, hour to 4 hours, depending on how good of heroin it is.
Can you verbalize to somebody who has no clue? That's I took opioids before. I know what a couple Vicodin and a Corona do. Right. Feels pretty good. But can you describe the pleasure or how you're perceiving it as pleasure when doing a blast of heroin through a needle?
I mean, this isn't something I like saying, but I still always describe it as a hug from Jesus.
Jesus.
I mean, I'm not the most religious person, but when I think of what a hug from Jesus would be, that's what I think of.
It's not surprising. I was telling you before about my buddy Gabe Noah, host of the Profession Confession podcast. Check it out. He described it kind of the same way. It's
just
being
the most
protected.
Euphoric,
it's being everything.
Every bit of, like.
And he wasn't shooting up. I think he was. You can smoke heroin, right?
Yeah.
I think he was smoking it. I think was where he got to. He never shot it up. But.
Yeah. Well, it's just. It's your problems melt away. Nothing, nothing matters. It's just.
How long are you in that state on average? So I'm sure it varies based on.
Yeah, it totally depends. I don't even know if I could give an average because it's like if you get, garbage stuff, you're not really in it. If you get really good stuff, you're in it for, an hour or two. And then again, it's, you get an initial rush for a while, and then it kind of mellows out into the high that it will be for, another hour or two after that.
Before your body tells you that you need more, are you completely off the high at all? Or are you trying to catch it? You trying to time it out right before so you don't hit that, like the tank is empty type feel?
Yeah, that's one thing we never like hitting. But it's, obviously if you'd have your way every time, you'd try to, get more before. And then, you'd feel that you're starting to, see with heroin, it's not really a come down. It's just, the high kind of dissipates. And then a few hours after that, you start getting dope sick. Okay. Whereas like meth and stuff, as soon as the high is ending, you start getting real irritable or, there's a definite come down to it. Whereas heroin, there isn't. So you're not so worried about keeping that high. You'd love to keep that high. You're not so worried about keeping that high as you are as not getting sick. And that's what every addiction turns into, is just a fight to not be dope sick for the next day.
Describe what being dope sick, well, clinically, what is it? And I'm assuming that's just when all the
it's
active
just
ingredients.
heroin withdrawal. So in your brain, you have mu opioid receptors.
Okay.
And
these are what those drugs are designed to affect.
Yep. This is exactly what these drugs are designed to affect, which is why a lot of people describe it as, a natural high, a lot like cannabis, because we have cannabinoid receptors in our brain. It's like we have opioid receptors in our brain. Shit, where was I talking about?
I want you to, no, that's fine. I want you to describe, to try to verbalize what that come down is and what it feels like.
Okay. Yeah. So again, there's not much of a come down, but when you start getting dope sick, okay, so all the heroin has left your opioid receptors. And then, the sickness, it comes on very, very gradually. Okay, so you start off with, at least for me, I'll start off with a runny nose. I'll start getting a little bit hot and cold. My skin will just feel really irritable, like where you're sitting around and like you just feel irritable, that's really the only way I can describe it.
Does it affect your disposition to others? Are you
absolutely
curt and aggressive with other people? And
not initially, but if somebody says something that you don't like, you're a lot more likely to go off. To go off. 90% of the time that I had ever yelled at anyone, I was probably dope sick.
Gotcha.
And then after that, it starts getting a lot worse. And to describe full dope sickness to anyone, it's cliche, it's what everyone says, but it's like the flu times 1,000.
Oh.
It's, again, your whole body, your skin feels like it's crawling, so you're really irritable. Okay, your nose is running. If you're like laying in bed, you're hot and cold, so you can't decide like whether you need a coat or a blanket or you want to rip it all off. It changes from minute to minute. You're vomiting nonstop, diarrhea, like it's just a miserable thing. And then almost the worst part about it all is the anxiety that you get from it. Just because you've never had a terrible flu or something, knowing that if you took this one thing, you're going to feel great.
Right.
And it's going to go away. So there's an intense anxiety that comes with it, which is why I've almost said that like the easiest detoxes I've had have been in jail, because I knew I wasn't going to get it. So that anxiety, it took that anxiety away, right. Which, those were probably the least safe detoxes I've ever had because there's no medical attention or anything. Right. But in terms of, anxiety, they've definitely been the easiest. But yeah, it's one thing that it's one of those things that you don't wish on anyone.
Right.
And again, when it comes to recovery, as much as I hate saying it, I always got to tell people that, I'm talking to who are interested in getting help and everything, that's going to be the easiest part.
Really?
It's the real work comes after. It's like, yeah, you're not dope sick any day, but it's one of those diseases that you truly fight for life. I knew somebody who just recently, he ran a very well-known organization in the area and had for a long time, and he ended up just losing that because he relapsed. So it's one of those things that no matter whether you have 30 days or 10 years, you're still fighting. You're still fighting for it.
He was in the recovery industry?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. How long was he clean?
I don't know exactly, but I know that it was well over 5 years for sure.
Holy shit.
Probably over 10. I'm not sure.
Holy shit. One other thing I wanted to ask about before we we get to some of your what you're doing to finance your use, can you tell me, with as much as you're comfortable with, how does you eject a pill? Like I understand it from a basic sense, but I thought there were safeguards put into
There are in some. So I'll run you through just a Roxy 30 or a blue 30 milligram oxycodone, what you do to inject those.
And please, nobody listening to this, don't interpret this as instructions on how to do this. And please, if you're considering using this, don't use it at all. But this is more for academic purposes because I want to know how it's done.
It's not worth it, trust me. But so oxycodone is actually water soluble.
Okay.
So with the 30 milligram pills, because there's a little bit of filler in them, but not much. All you have to do with them is crush them up in a spoon, add water, and stir it up for. I was always really anal to make sure that I got everything soaked into it. So I'd stir it for like a minute or two. Right. But I mean, really, 15 seconds. And because oxycodone is water soluble, then you throw a cotton in it, draw it up. And with those pills, there will be powder left in it in the spoon. But that's all the filler, all the drug is soaked into the water.
What is the... and this is where my drug knowledge is lacking, is like when they do the heat up something on the spoon, is that's I mean, with pills, especially with oxy pills, that's totally that's basically ruining it. All you're going to do is burn it off. But with like things like black tar heroin, that is essential to burn off the cut and make it a little bit more pure, just so you're not. Oh, so what you're burning off is whatever it's been cut with to get a more pure product. With the pill, it doesn't apply to the.
And
pills.
a lot of people with like China white heroin, they won't heat it. Some will, some won't. But with black tar, I mean, you don't have to heat it, but it's really kind of disgusting, and you're opening yourself up to a lot more bacteria and infections and whatnot.
Okay. One more thing, now that you kind of gave me another question, is to people, especially like parents who maybe don't have a lot of drug knowledge, you've mentioned a couple different types, black tar heroin, China white heroin. Describe to me the differences of those two, and if like a potential parent or spouse or somebody who's maybe got somebody in their life using, so what they can look for, what like telltale signs of either use or types of drugs if they were to discover them.
See, I mean, heroin, the way it looks, ranges so much. I mean, you have black tar heroin that, can almost be like reflective and break off like glass almost. And then you can have black tar heroin that looks, like tar, and is really almost kind of gooey and whatnot. Okay. And then you can have brown powder heroin. And then you can have China white that is just, straight white powder. Or you can have China white that is gray. Or you can have China white that is, almost looks like concrete. Or even is white, but is in, a rock, and you almost gotta shave it off of it. Heroin varies so much. So I always, if you find a powder or anything that looks like tar or anything, obviously look into it. But more than that, if you have a spouse or a significant other that you're worried about or that you think may be using, look for other signs, too. I mean, if they're shooting up, the easiest way is track marks. And people don't only shoot in their arms. I used to always shoot in my legs to avoid my arms so I could say, hey, I'm not shooting up, But track marks are pretty easy to see because...
Can you basically shoot anywhere on your body?
You can shoot anywhere on your body that's a vein. I've shot in my arms,
it has to go
legs.
Specifically in the vein. You just can't just put in your...
Well, okay, you can muscle it, but it's... I know people that have, specifically done it that way, but most people would kind of call that a waste and just, I mean, you don't want to
because ideally you want it in the bloodstream as quick as possible. So.
Yes. And two, if you muscle it, you can end up with abscesses and stuff like that. but yeah, so that's a big way. Another way is, if they're smoking it, if, all your tinfoil's going missing, or, you see pens or straws that are cut down. And
is there a smell, distinctive odor to it? If they're, I guess, smoking it specifically.
I don't know if I could describe it. Black tar, yes, there is, but I don't know if I'd so much be worried about the smell. Yeah, I just, if you notice your partner, if their eyes are absolutely pinned out, and if they're, a lot more nodding out at the table or nodding out at the couch when they shouldn't be, or anything like that. I mean, that's just, it's one of those things where, unless if you find something, or most of the time you aren't going to find something concrete, it's going to be little things that kind of add up. So again, it's just, it's pay attention to your loved ones and ask what's going on in their life. Sometimes that's it too,
Well, we're at the point now. Let's talk about how you were funding this addiction when it got out of control.
Okay.
You couldn't afford to do it out of your own pocket.
Yeah. So once I started shooting up, it saved me money for like a week, and then it totally got out of control. I couldn't afford it. I had no idea how to afford it. And I've never really been, even if I was to go out and sell, I don't think I could have sold enough to support my habit at that point.
That's a bold statement, because
that's a lot of use. Well, especially, I mean, maybe if I was somewhere else and it was cheaper, yes, but in Boomtown at that time, for the prices I could get it and sell it, I couldn't support it.
Right.
And I had access to a company's bank account. Okay. My mom was a big part of a coal company in town, and as guilty as I still am today about it, addiction makes you do some really terrible things, and that was definitely one of them for me. So yeah, I started embezzling money from a business to be able to support my habit. And then
can you tell us like technically what you were doing? How was this embezzlement process working? What were
you? I was really just, I mean, I wasn't, some computer genius or anything like that. It was just my mother happened to be part of a company, and I'd take the checks and I'd put them in a computer and, put my name or something like that. And then my mom started working from home for a while, so then I'd just print them out on the computer right in our family room.
Right. You had access to the hard copy checks. You were
printing out checks. I'd print them out, and I'd take her signature stamp it, go cash it, and then it became an issue where, I was cashing so many checks that like I'd be showing up to Walmart every day to cash a check for $3,000, and
I was just getting ready to ask you, what was your average check that you were printing out?
Well, so the addiction then at that point, I was, because I had access to that money, that's where it, for pills anyways, kind of where it topped out, where I was doing 40 to 50 of those 30 milligram oxys a day, IV, 6 of them in one single shot, actually. So that was $2,000 a day. So it was, I'd write a check for $2,000 or maybe $5,000, and I'd have 2.5 days worth or something. But I was cashing so many checks at so many different places that I couldn't keep doing it. So then it became, I'd give my friend a check, for say $2,500, and give him like $500 just to cash the check, because I'm so doped out and out of my mind that, you don't ever think this is going to come to a head. And more so than that, an addict is never worried about tomorrow. As long as I have today, I'm good.
Right.
Screw tomorrow. As long as I have today, I'm good. And, it's like you look at a company and you're just like looking at it as I'm looking at it as like, oh, it's just money. Who cares? It's not It's not mine. It's
So-
not my parents. Who cares?
Can you tell us what on record how much you've you ended up taking?
So I believe when it was all said and done, I mean, I guess I don't know exactly for sure, but I believe 280,000 over a year.
And for that 280,000, the majority of that went into
Every
your body?
penny. Every penny went into my arm.
Jesus.
Every penny. And I mean, it's not like when it,
This was a year.
Yeah, this was a year. This is from like August 2014 until, it all came to a head September 14th, 2015, is when I got caught for it. So, yeah, and I mean, come September 14th, it's not like I had a penny on me, so it really, every bit of it went straight into my arm.
That's crazy. Were you discovered? How did that process go? Was it law enforcement involved? What was the...
So essentially it was just, I wasn't covering my tracks. And so my mom was a part of this company. And I mean, I guess I don't know exactly how it went, but I just know that somehow the CEO or somebody who was working with the computer found out, and we were contacted. And then again, because my mom was a part of this company, they were looking at charging her, which is probably the only reason I didn't go to prison.
So basically what you're saying is it was discovered within the company.
Yeah, it was.
And their first impulse was, well, she's in charge of the books. Her stamp's on it. She must be robbing the company.
Yep, she must. So they were going to charge me too.
Okay.
But she was on that. So
so they knew right away that you were involved in some kind of way? I'm just trying to think what was
I guess I don't know for sure.
You were doped out at the time anyway. So
yeah, I was so high at the time.
Somehow
I didn't know what was going on. But anyway, they put it together really quickly.
Now, is this when your parents discovered you had this addiction issue, or did they know anything prior?
They knew I had an addiction issue for probably like the previous year.
Okay.
Again, no idea the extent, I don't think, and I had never done anything wrong previously. So it's when you go and you tell your parents you're doing good.
So there was no
they assume you're
petty
doing
theft.
good.
There was no robberies or anything like that for them to indicate that you were going to turn criminal with your usage? Not
like in terms of police
okay.
issues or anything like that. I mean, there was some stuff around the house maybe.
Okay.
But
selling some stuff to get things,
yeah,
but
I mean, really not. I don't know. It's my parents. I mean, my mom is an absolute saint. My dad is. They're two of the greatest people on the planet. And they're some of the people that when you tell them something, they believe that you're telling them the truth because they just don't understand why people would lie, I guess, different time, right. I guess. But
and I'm going to assume they didn't have any working knowledge of drug use and addiction and stuff.
Absolutely not. So, if
they didn't do the right things or try to help the right way, it was
again,
they
and
didn't
it's like,
understand.
I know they were suspicious, but again, when you have a son who has mostly done everything right his whole life, and he's telling you one thing, you're going to have a tendency to believe him.
Can you tell us, obviously you didn't go to jail for that. Was there any kind of punishment at all for you? I mean,
so
how did this get resolved?
What ended up happening was I'm sure I would have went to prison, but again, they were trying to rope my mother in with it. So my family ended up paying it off.
Okay.
Then with the intention that I then pay them back. But the stipulation on them not pressing the charges on that was for me to go to rehab. Okay. So that happened September 14th. September 15th, I was on my way to Battle Creek, Michigan to go to my first inpatient rehab. And I went there and...
Any reason why you went to that one? Was it...
It was one that my parents Googled and it came up. Okay. It ended up not being a very good place either. It's a front for Scientology. That's a whole different story.
Really?
Yeah. They had no idea. I didn't know, but it used to be part of a company called Narconon, which is very famous and has a very bad reputation. And then because of the reputation in the lawsuits, anyway, they changed the name and they changed ownership from the guy to his sister and called it a Forever Recovery.
So I'm gonna have to press you for just a few more details about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you discover that it was a Scientology thing, and what was their angle? Just
all
get people in the door?
All their books there were like L. Ron Hubbard books and stuff. And then once I didn't last long, but once I got out, I ended up looking into it and finding out that it was a front for Scientology. And they're also crooked. They kind of scam insurance companies. They still owe my parents like $3,000.
So this is just
there's a huge class action lawsuit against them, or there was.
Okay.
But
So it wasn't like Scientologists are trying to create a business stream of recovery. They're like a lot of these other shady recovery things where they saw an opportunity to make some money and invested into one.
Right, exactly.
They're not trying to recruit you for Scientology. They're just trying to get the insurance checks.
I guess I wasn't there long enough to know. A lot of people that have been to other Narconon centers say that they do kind of try to recruit you for Scientology. No, I was only there for 9 days. I convinced my way to AMA.
Now that I think about it, somebody who's addicted to a drug may be more susceptible to bullshit.
Exactly. A lot of people. I mean, that's why I don't want to say that's why, but you know, a lot of people who are in recovery, they find something else to kind of, whether it's God or whether it's NA meetings or AA or something. It's, you know, people that are in recovery, they usually find something to grab onto and hold on to as almost kind of, you know, their higher power, something to, you know, continue for. And so I really think that Scientology kind of saw that as an in. And a lot of people that I know who have went to other Narconons have kind of said the same thing. They recruit you for Scientology, or they try to recruit you to come back and work there when you only have like 60 days clean.
Wow.
And it's a whole shady thing. But
you weren't there at this one long.
No, I was only there for 9 days. I AMA'd and went back home and started doing the same thing, and that's kind of when I no longer had the embezzlement to do. I could no longer afford $2,000 in pills a day. So at that point is when I switched to heroin.
So how was it? Even a day of transition? Did you get back like, oh, okay, I'm going to be able to do this, and then, or how soon
it was
were
maybe
you?
I mean, at that point I had done heroin a couple times.
Right.
You know, when like you couldn't get pills or something, but I had maybe only done it, you know, twice. I was home for maybe a week until I realized that there was no way I could make it happen. And when I was home that first week, I was still like getting pills, but I wasn't even able to keep myself well with, you know, not dope sick. So I learned pretty quick that the only way I was going to be able to was to switch over to heroin, which super expensive in and of itself, but still a hell of a lot cheaper than pills were there at the time.
And much like pills, it was easy to get. It was just
I mean, honestly, I've always said for me and Williston, heroin is easier for me to get than it is for me to drive to the liquor store and get a bottle of booze.
Wow.
So, wow. I mean, it's just everywhere.
Now, a couple things we wanted to talk about kind of before your final point of recovery was you went to multiple recovery places, kind of in and out some, and
yeah. I went to so again that Scientology place.
That's wild.
I know.
It's mind blowing.
Hey, if any of the listeners got some spare time and they want some crazy stuff to look up the company called Narcanon. It's it's just a recovery-based Scientology company, and the stories that people have are mind-blowing.
Oh shit!
But so afterwards, I ended up going to a couple other treatment centers. So I got back. I kind of kept doing my thing, and in February of 2016, I went to another treatment center in Fargo, and at that point, I thought that I was ready at that time. Like I thought that was it, and I thought that I was going to go and I was going to get clean, and I was going to be that. And then, like a month and a half in, my best friend back in Williston ended up dying due to, from what I understand at least, was computer duster. At least that's my understanding of it anyways.
Now, was your friend, he was also using
heroin?
Yeah, he was
just something he was a heroin addict. He was, we were really close, especially like in high school and everything. Again, I mean, he was like my best friend growing up.
And so people understand when you say computer duster, this is the compressed air.
Yeah, just
used for spraying off a keyboard. And people huff it and they get a high off that. So it's a cheap high, not the high he wanted apparently, because he probably would have preferred heroin. But
right. And again, I don't, know. I don't have the police report. I don't know the full story, but he was a drug addict, and he was a poly-drug abuser, so he would use most drugs, but heroin and meth were kind of his things.
That's fine.
And
how does what kills you when you're huffing duster? How does that work, as you understand it?
Okay, so I'm probably not the best person to ask about this.
Right.
From my understanding, I believe it freezes your lungs.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if I'm 100% correct about that or not. I guess I've never really looked it up, but that's always the understanding that I've had, that it
Well, that makes sense, because I know when
your lungs.
if you spray it at the wrong angle, you can get
it
builds up a frost. You can get freezer burn on your finger, or frostbite on your finger.
Yeah, you turn it upside down and spray it. The whole can, it's like snow on it almost. It freezes right away.
That's gotta be a hard way to go.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but so he passed away, and I went back. I left treatment for his funeral. I got like a week pass to come home, and I came home, was a pallbearer at his funeral, went back, and then, did another couple weeks in treatment and got out. And when I got out, at that time
Did you feel like that going to his funeral, being the pallbearer? Were you at the time, did you feel like you're taking something away from that? Like, this is a sign, this is just more reason for me to stay clean now. Were you making that connection? Was it?
No, not at that one. I didn't make it at all. That one, I was so hurt by it and so devastated that, I didn't really know what to do. So I wasn't, at that time at least, I wasn't getting that I should stay clean for him, or this is what it can do. It just, was total devastation almost. Right. And so I went back to treatment, got out, and just kind of went right back to it. I didn't know how to cope with my feelings. I didn't know how to cope with the depression, the sadness, anything like that.
How quick does that decision kind of turn over in your head from I'm clean, I'm in recovery? Do you just wake up one day, I can't do it anymore? Here we go.
I mean, it totally depends on the situation. I mean, sometimes people will say that like relapses will be months in the making, because you'll start doing little things different that you're not doing for your recovery, and that leads to something else and something else. But I think every situation is different. I really do. You know, sometimes it can be you wake up in the morning and you just say, fuck it. Or other times it can, you know, just be the culmination of many little things to lead you to be like, well.
Is there ever a moment of internal struggle from like trying to stop yourself from going out the door to making the purchase? Then getting it, then
even I mean even today in sobriety, yes. Really? I mean that's something that I feel like every addict deals with, or at least every recovering addict deals with every day of their life. You know, it gets easier the longer you go on, but there are always rough days, and there, you know, even as I say today, almost 2 years into my recovery, it is a hell of a lot easier than it was at the beginning, but I'd be lying that if I didn't think about it every single day. Okay. Now, most of the time it is a fairly fleeting thought, but there are still times when I'm literally sitting on my couch just white knuckling it like, you know, I want to get high.
Well, we'll probably talk more about this in when we get to your recovery part of the story, but what do you do? What do you do when the ping of desire for this is at its strongest? Do you have somebody to call?
Hey, that's a fight that I think every recovery expert would love to know exactly what to do.
There's no one right way to do it.
Yeah, there's no one right way. I mean, a lot of people will say, you know, call your sponsor or call somebody you trust, which you can do, but a lot of times for me, when I'm in that frame of mind, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Right.
I try to think about, at least for me, I try to think about just where I'm at and if I'm willing to give it all up. Because the thing is when you go and you relapse, you're not planning on going through it all over again. You're just saying, I'm going to do it this one time and that's it. And you convince yourself that you're just going to do it one time, even though you know in the back of your mind that's bullshit.
Right.
So I always just try to tell myself that, you know, one time is a fucking lie. It'll turn right back into what it was. And do I really want to throw everything that I've worked this hard for away? And at least at this point so far, it hasn't been that yet. So.
Gotcha. One of your travels, if I remember correctly in our pre-conversation, you went to California originally for treatment?
Yes. Okay. So, I'm sorry, I accidentally kind of skipped that. That was that was right after 2 months after the first treatment in Michigan.
So this would technically be your second treatment?
Yep. So that was before the one where my friend died. And again, that wasn't a good treatment center either. I don't think it was that bad. It was just they didn't have the best staff.
Okay. Was it good as in it was a legitimate treatment? Or
well, it was the guy who ran it was in it for the money. It's not like he wasn't running like a flop house or anything like a lot of treatment centers down in Florida do. But
well, tell me. Okay, well, I'm going to ask a couple things now. So tell me, what do you mean by flop house and
okay? So
what is that
in the treatment industry? Which is one thing I want to kind of reiterate to the listeners is that if anybody out there is looking for treatment or you're looking for treatment for a loved one, be wary of where you look. 50% of treatment centers are awesome. 50% of them are terrible.
And by terrible, you mean not good quality or it's a scam?
I mean...
Or a little bit of both?
A little of both, almost. So both South Florida and Orange County, California, where I was.
South Florida, that we should acknowledge is
South Florida, Delray Beach, Miami area.
Well, I'm saying is they're responsible for a lot of the issues that we're having today.
Yeah, because
they were the pain
with
clinics.
The pill mills.
Yeah, you go to see the chiropractor or whatever, and then right next door was
now they got the flop house.
And then that's all they would sell. They would just sell fucking opioid pills. It was like a pharmacy, quote unquote pharmacy.
Yeah, it'd be a pharmacy that only had opiates.
Right. That's professional. Very good. But yeah, so but a flop house, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's what happens is a lot of people who are a little bit shady open up treatment centers, or they'll open up sober houses, because a lot of times in those places, people will stay at a sober house and then they'll bus to a IOP treatment center in the day.
Right.
And these people basically just try to scam your insurance company and either get you to stay there as long as you can. Some of them, I've heard many stories about the owners of these houses giving the clients dope so they can fail a drug test, go back to detox so they get another kickback, come back and they get another kickback from insurance. So it's basically they prey on people who have insurance.
Jesus Christ.
So thankfully, the last 2 times I went to rehab, I didn't have insurance, so I didn't have to worry about it. I got to go to the state-run places.
What kind of monster do you to be? And this is coming from a former crack dealer. That was my occupation earlier in my late teens. I feel like I'm a monster for looking back and with mature eyes and wisdom,
right,
of what I contributed to the decay of society and people that I hurt in my pursuit of profit. But to me, it seems just a little bit uglier that when you use this form of recovery, this treatment center, you're essentially a drug dealer in a way. You're getting your money in a backhanded kind of sort of way.
Exactly.
But you're using their addiction, giving them false hope, manipulating the victims of this thing.
Well, they'll charge the insurance company outrageous prices for like your analysis, and they'll give them to you like every day. They'll max out basically everything with your insurance, and then like once your insurance is maxed out and they can't keep you in there anymore, a lot of them will give you drugs so you relapse, then you go back to detox, and then your insurance lets you come back again, and they can do it all over again. And the sad thing is a lot of these guys, a lot of them are in recovery too, and it's just that's the sad thing, is that they're shitty people all over this world. And
wow, this is amazing. Okay, so you explained what the Flophouse was. California, that treatment center, you felt that was not a good one because of just quality of treatment? Yeah, just not a good one because of quality of treatment. And again, at that one, I didn't really want to be there in the first place. So you weren't ready? Okay. So I left after a week, and I spent the next couple of weeks in Orange County at hotels just getting high, which is the first time I've ever saw a person die too, which... This is somebody that you were doing drugs with and they overdosed and died? Yes, it was somebody that I was doing drugs with, their friend, okay. I guess. I don't know if it was friend. We were both fresh out of treatment. I had never seen the guy before, but yeah, he brought him over, and they, my buddy that I knew went to go. I was staying at this hotel, and I sent my buddy down to go get some H, and he brought his buddy back up. And what had happened is that his buddy of his, he didn't get fentanyl or anything like that. What had happened is his buddy had owed these people a bunch of money. And so when they came to give him his heroin, they mixed, I don't know what they mixed in it. I wasn't around for the... they killed him? But they mixed rat poison or something in it. So when he shot up, this was proven? Did the toxicology test show this? Or I mean, I wasn't around when the toxicology test happened, right. But I've heard of many things happening like this before. And it wasn't, I've witnessed many overdoses. Okay. And this wasn't an overdose. The guy, as soon as he shot up, he started convulsing and he started screaming, "I'm on fire," which is the exact opposite of something. I mean, if you're overdosing, you're just going to kind of fall out, But he essentially went into a seizure and was screaming that he felt like his body was on fire and was convulsing, and then just stopped. And that was that. So, and I understand the condition of being addicted. What did you guys do as users with drugs there? Did you guys like immediately call 911 or you're like,
Called
let's do our
911.
drugs and then we'll call? Or
No, we immediately. I've always been the one that, like, I've always felt that I'd rather go to jail or sit in prison for something than have death on my conscience. And at this time, we didn't even know the guy was dead, or we didn't know if he could be saved or what, but it was convulsing and then stopped. And he wasn't my buddy. He was laying in my other friend's arms, so I didn't know what was going on.
right.
So we called 911. Ambulance gets there, and I went and I, hid the drugs and stuff, and sat out back. And then my buddy just walks around the corner, and he's like, he's dead. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, he's dead. I was like, do they need you for questioning or anything? Do they know I was there? They're like, no. He's dead. And it was the oddest thing I've ever experienced in my life, because he didn't even like get questioned by the police. He didn't.
Well, that's shocking to me too. But now I think about it, it's probably to the point of being commonplace now. Like,
Exactly.
another one has died. We've got to hurry up and clean up here because there's 3 more overdoses down the street.
3 more, and especially in a place like Orange County, where there's, such a high population and such a, such a big drug culture down there too, both with any drug, it's Southern California.
Right. So was it did it play out as it being just as cold as they just threw him on a gurney, rolled the body out? And
see, from my understanding, I talked to that person later on. Again, and I mean, we hung out for like the next week before I headed back up to North Dakota. And probably 6 months after I got back to North Dakota one day, I was like, man, I wonder whatever happened. And I messaged him and I was like, so what happened? Did you hear it? And all he messaged me back was, he's like, it's a hot shot, which is
street term for the killing somebody. And
yeah. That's all he ever told me. And that's the last time I've ever heard from that guy since.
Something I was curious about, because you're from small town Williston, North Dakota, and you've done drugs there, and you're in that community of drug users and addicts there. Was there any discernible difference when you went to California and you're in a different environment? I mean, California is...
Price. I love California.
Like,
price.
Okay. Oh,
and I was there in November and December, so
it was dirt cheap.
So yeah, it was really cheap. I mean, compared to the rest of the U.S., it wasn't. It was pretty normal, maybe a little cheaper, but I was there in November and December, whereas I'm from, one of the coldest spots in the country, so I enjoyed it.
And it's just even easier than you said. It was easier to get than getting alcohol in Williston.
Yeah. It was essentially the same down there. The first time I got down there was off Craigslist.
No shit.
Yeah.
Tell me what the ad read.
I looked up black roofing tar, and this guy had an ad for black roofing tar, $80 a gallon. So $80 a gram. And then it had, I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was the funniest shit ever.
That's fucking
It was
bold.
like, is your leaky roof making you sick? Our roofing tar is, guaranteed to fix any leaky roofs and,
Holy shit.
make you feel great. Yeah, it was the funniest
Is
shit
this
I've
one of
ever
many
read.
ads?
Oh, yeah, tons.
Good
Tons.
God.
Yeah. It was, I understand that they've cleaned that up some, but I know that they still advertise on it. But I don't think they do black roofing tar anymore.
Well, it makes
and
sense because
I know that Orange County is like one of the only places that had it like that. Because after that, I had been like here in Minneapolis and stuff, and I'd try to do the same thing, and I couldn't get. Or there'd be something, but it'd be some like Nigerian with a scam trying to.
Right. That makes sense because that seems. I think that time frame kind of sets it because when. CraigsList had a big problem with, like the prostitution and so forth. And they would put on basically just ads like, look, you give me these roses
right.
in exchange for, good time, whatever it is. So, but they've cleaned that shit up.
Yeah.
I guess it was kind of the same
this
MO as far as...
This would have been late November, early December 2015.
Holy fuck, that's bold.
Yeah.
That is insane.
But so convenient.
Right.
And they
just
come
there.
right to your hotel, too. And it was...
Well, that's my buddy Gabe, when I was telling you he did that 3-part series on his addiction, was like I think he was saying the Mexican cartel was like the bigger supplier.
Yeah.
And where he was at, I think he was in Los Angeles. And you just call up a number and they have a delivery service.
Yeah, essentially that's it.
And, oftentimes there'd be congregations of addicts would be just waiting for the car to make its round.
Yeah.
And they would just...
Yeah, it's definitely wild, that's for
Holy
sure.
fuck, dude.
Bold, too, but...
Unbelievable. You had a few other people die. I think you told me of your close friends. What was
so this would have been... So my first really close... like my best friend passed away, and that was March 2016, when I was in the middle of that third rehab. Mm-hmm. And then it went, after that I kept using and everything. And then in May 2017, another really, really close friend of mine died from fentanyl, the same fentanyl that I had done. And my tolerance, like even with good stuff, I'd shoot 3 points of it, and it drew up pink, so we knew it was fentanyl. So I tried just a quarter of a point of it and almost overdosed. Like for 45 minutes, I was not, and fentanyl only lasts like an hour. So for 45 minutes.
So 1/6 of what you would normally have done in heroin was a near fatal dose for you.
No, less than 1/6.
Less than 1/6.
A quarter of a point when I normally
a quarter.
do like 3
shit.
Yeah.
12.
Yeah, it was just to test it because I was like, oh, I know this is going to be strong. Let's see how strong I'll do this, and I'll do not. And that quarter of a point literally almost gave me an overdose. I was, for 45 minutes, I was nodding out, not being able to, stand up or anything. And I remember I called my buddy and I was like, dude, somebody's going to die tonight. Like, this shit ain't no joke. Like, if you get it, be fucking careful, And then I get a call like 2 hours later that another one of my really good friends passed away.
From this batch?
From this batch, yeah.
This is probably a good time to explain, because fentanyl, it's not a new drug. Rogan just had somebody on his podcast who did.
And I love that podcast because...
Did you hear you know what I'm talking about? The guy?
Yep. He went in depth on a lot of things that I actually wanted to speak about because, fentanyl's been around since the 50s. It was created initially as something for surgery, something that would act faster than morphine and be stronger. But there are so many misconceptions about fentanyl going around right now.
Well, can you start by telling tell us what it is?
Okay, so fentanyl is a synthetic opioid.
Okay,
I believe. Anyway, it's an opioid, whether synthetic or I believe it's synthetic.
Lab made, not made from like poppy plants or anything like derivative like that. It's
it's totally it's synthetic. It's been around since the 50s. And then it's always, or at least the last number of years, it's been big for, cancer patients and whatnot. And then when Chinese labs started making it in powder form, it started getting cut into heroin and stuff. Before, you'd maybe see fentanyl cut into heroin because people would cut the gel out of a fentanyl patch and cut it into it. Very, very rarely. I mean, you would...
And
fentanyl
so people
and heroin was unheard of,
right? So people who aren't familiar with drug culture and terms, when you say cut heroin, it's a way to you start with, say you got an ounce of heroin.
Yep.
But if you want to expand your profitability of that,
you'd normally cut, baby powder, whatever, ingredient in it to make it go further. But then,
Like I never, when I was selling crack in my earlier days, I never cooked the dope. I never started with like raw powder and made it
Right.
myself. But I understood that, you know, when I was getting crack pre-cooked to sell, that it was being cut with something to expand.
Right,
And that
right.
was had a lot to do with how it was cut and what products they used and different potency and actually sometimes different effects. Sometimes
Right.
they use baby laxative and a baking powder or something like that.
Exactly.
And it affected all that.
yeah, so normally cut is going to be something like that, or quinine, or, you know, they're going to cut it with something. But then when this illicit fentanyl came around, these Chinese labs started making it, people started ordering it, and it was so cheap. You could get, you know, a kilogram of fentanyl for $10,000, which if you were to point it or sell it as heroin, you could make up to $10 million off that $10,000 investment. Jesus. So it's essentially, I mean, in the drug world, the best investment you could ever make.
Right.
You know, just sell it as heroin. But they cut it into their heroin that maybe wasn't good or something, you know, to make it a lot stronger,
Right.
or whatnot. And now you're seeing a lot of stuff that has no heroin whatsoever in it. It's just straight fentanyl. But the problem is fentanyl is, I believe it's 100 times stronger than morphine, if I'm not mistaken. 2 milligrams of it is the average to kill an adult human being. An opioid tolerant person, 5 milligrams. And I know most people listening, if they have any idea what 5 milligrams is, if you look at a 5 milligram pill, like that's going to have different fillers and stuff in it too, a number of different things. 5 milligrams essentially is a few grains of salt.
Right.
So trying to mix that in with something and, you know, get it to be the right consistency and right dose, unless if you are, you know, a trained chemist, is pretty damn impossible. So you get a lot of street dealers that order Chinese fentanyl and are cutting it into their dope, or they're just taking the fentanyl and they're adding cut to it and selling
Cutting
it
the
as,
fentanyl itself
Yep.
down, so it's
Right.
less prone. Do you? And you may not have the answer to this. And it was covered. A lot of that was covered in that Rogan. I'm trying to remember the guest's name. He was a
I can't remember it off the
reporter,
top of
but
my
it's
head
a
either.
fairly recent episode, and everybody should check it out. But is it just that easy to order it? Do you have to have any kind of certification if you're?
No, I mean just dark web.
Okay, dark web order.
You know, so if you have any experience in that, you can do it, or any of the, you know, dark web drug sites. But more so, I mean, fentanyl is a huge problem. Another huge problem we're seeing lately, though, with fentanyl is the response with police and emergency services with it. A couple of years ago, there was a huge scare that, you know, fentanyl, that if you touch fentanyl, you can overdose from it.
Right. That wasn't
It's
true.
a huge
right?
myth.
Right.
It's not the case, but police still believe it. I have been in many arguments with police, and sometimes they'll, you know, after I give them enough facts, they'll kind of change their mind on it, but some of them don't want to believe it because that's what they were told
Right.
at one time.
Was there any kind of reaction that they were getting from being around it? Was it
Panic
inhaling it?
attacks. Okay, so they were told that fentanyl could absorb through the skin, and they bought it because one of the biggest things fentanyl comes in is fentanyl patches. But the thing is those pharmaceutical companies spent millions of dollars developing patches to get it to absorb through the skin. The powder, the illicit fentanyl powder you are receiving from China, is not a fentanyl patch. It does not have the medicine or mechanisms to absorb through the skin on its own. So, you know, it's like I handled fentanyl almost every day of my life for a long time, being an addict. And I've seen many videos where guys have came out and grabbed a ball of fentanyl, like, look, let me sit here for however long and let's see if it does something, just to, you know, display that it's a bunch of bullshit.
Does it change if you have like powder in your hands? Can you brush your eyes? Can you
see? Now, if you were to inhale it, you probably overdose that way.
Right.
But the odds of like a police officer going in somewhere and there being a big enough amount of fentanyl powder for them to somehow kick up enough of it into the air
To breathe
then
in.
breathe in. But you're seeing a lot of these. I mean, there are a lot of articles where, cops have overdosed on fentanyl, but you look into it, no, they didn't. And a lot of these cops overdosing, the cop is giving themselves Narcan, which is the opiate antidote. They're giving themselves Narcan, or they're telling their buddy, hey, I'm overdosing, I need Narcan. Well, if anybody's any bit familiar with overdoses, that's not an overdose. If you're overdosing, you are totally unconscious, not breathing, nothing. Even if you are going into an overdose, you're not going to be able to say, hey, buddy, I think I'm overdosing right now.
So are you thinking it's kind of psychosomatic where...
Exactly. They were told, that they could absorb this, and then they're working in these situations. And then, I've dealt with panic attacks before, especially when my back was at its worst. And I noticed a lot of situations like that where it just, it's totally psychosomatic. I mean, and then they'll go to the doctor and they'll, test them and check them out and stuff. And then when their drug test results come back, there's no drugs in their system.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned the Narcan, because something you brought me is a little 2-pack package of Narcan nasal spray, 4 milligram dispensers, and these are designed specifically for?
Yep, they're designed specifically to reverse an opiate overdose. And there are 2 different kinds. So there's the nasal spray like I brought you, and then there's also another kind where it's a vial and there's like a kit with a needle in it, and you ingest it or inject it into the muscle of an overdose person.
Right.
Those are just a lot more user friendly.
It looks just like any kind of nose spray. It's got a little thing that goes in your nose, and you depress this right here, I assume, and it shoots that in there.
Yep.
What is Narcan? What is it? What's going on with that?
Narcan is a drug called naloxone, and it's just, essentially opiate antidote. Okay. That's the easiest way to describe it. So opiates bind to receptors in your brain called the mu-opioid receptors, and they just bind to them. And all naloxone does is it binds to them stronger. So what it does is it physically rips the drugs out of the receptors and binds to it so nothing else can, which throws you out of an overdose, and also throws you into precipitated withdrawal, which isn't fun, but at least you're alive,
If somebody who wasn't going through an overdose, what would this kind of effect would it have on them?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
So that's the best thing about Narcan. Now, if they were addicted to opiates and you were to give that to them, like say they weren't suffering an overdose, but
it would shoot into that.
It'd shoot them straight into severe withdrawal.
Whoa.
But anybody who doesn't take opiates or is not addicted to them anyway, like you could shoot that up your nose right now and it would do literally nothing to you, totally safe, which is why I always say it's
if somebody's listening or maybe has a family member or loved one who they suspect using heroin and they want to get one of these things, are they expensive to get, or do they give them away anywhere?
A lot of places will give them away. See, they can't, without insurance, those can run about like $140 at the pharmacy.
Per dose? Or per box?
Per box, okay. Which has two doses in it. But, some overdoses, especially with some of the stronger fentanyl we're seeing now, can take 4 doses, to revive somebody. So yeah, without insurance, the nasal spray can be expensive. I don't know what it is exactly with insurance, but most communities not most communities, but there are a lot of organizations that give Narcan away, which I think is phenomenal, because not everybody, even with insurance, spend $70, and especially for addicts. Like if I'm out there using, I don't want to go and spend $70 on Narcan.
And I know a lot of, most EMS units are
Yep.
covering these,
And a
even
lot
some
of police
cops
now.
are too.
Yep.
Even though I heard some story, I can't remember. I don't want to put on the wrong department. But I heard something in the news about a sheriff who was like specifically said he's not going to provide these.
Yeah, in Ohio.
Is it Ohio?
Yeah, he said.
Rather let people die than
Yeah, that's exactly what he said.
take the expense of.
Yeah. That's the expense.
Which doesn't even consider the fact of what if it's a child who gets into somebody's stash and.
Yeah, there was just I was just reading on the news that, man, I wonder if it was in North Dakota or if it was, I don't know. But anyway, I read that this lady was at a hotel and she was asleep and her child got into her heroin and started overdosing. Yeah, so it's just, Narcan is one of the things where I think there's something that everybody should have, whether you know somebody addicted or not. And the thing is odds are, even if you don't think you know somebody addicted, you probably do. Right. It's just, I mean, this epidemic spans so far and wide where it's, there are judges, lawyers, cops, FBI, like it hits all sections of society. And there are a lot of functioning drug addicts out there. So and you never know too when you'll just be driving and come across an overdose and it can save a life. So
and that all walks of life thing, I couldn't be more true because of where a lot of this stuff starts from, and that's from pain medication prescription.
Exactly. That
everyone's getting. They're giving it to kids. They're giving it for dental surgery. They're giving it for sprains, for broken bones, everything. So it just goes out there, and they're just ticking time bombs of potential addiction. Getting to start taking that shit.
Well, that's it too. I mean, the U.S. counts for 5% of the population, but we take 80% of the world's pain medication.
Jesus Christ. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's still definitely overprescribed. It's getting a little bit better, but
it's another one of my guilty. There was a brief time when I had my hands on a substantial amount of pain medication. I didn't appreciate what it was, and I was selling them as a dealer. And not knowing what I'm contributing to. And it was shortly after that where I started getting kind of the education about how serious it was. And it's...
Well, it is. And that's it too. It's a lot of people, a lot of heroin dealers and stuff, they're just not knowledgeable on it, or, they need money and it's an easy way. So it's like, I'm not one to go around and, blame dealers or blame anybody. People got to do what they got to do, and a lot of people just don't have the education, or don't know, or just don't understand what they're doing.
Right. I don't know. So it's because I was selling to people who I would consider friends.
Right. I know.
So I look back now,
which is what most dealers do that are.
Yeah, and I look back now, I was like, I could have contributed to the death of people who I like or respect and care about, and that's ugly. Yeah, obviously I've changed since then. Well, let's talk about your final recovery and how that went, and then I want to turn it over to you to kind of talk about the harm reduction and treatment and so forth.
Okay.
Of what you're advocating for. So let's talk about your final at recovery.
So my final recovery actually starts probably a year or so before that. And that is right after my second really close friend passed away from the fentanyl overdose. I went to rehab again. And that time, the previous time, I really thought I was ready. That time, my friend had passed away the week before. I wasn't I was ready, but I wasn't quite sure. And then my girlfriend of 8 years, who was the absolute, love of my life, my soulmate, broke up with me because of my use. At that, I had been a drug addict for how long?
She was using with you. She was
no.
there.
She was a totally straight edge. Good girl, sweetheart. Never has done anything wrong.
Right.
and just dating this guy who ended up becoming a big drug addict and piece of shit, essentially. And she loved me, but it gets to a point with any relationship where you can only put up with so much before you gotta kind of cut ties and go. And it reached that point when I was in that rehab there, and this was in June 2017. And I went, and then I got out of that treatment, and I just, after my friend dying and getting broken up with, and a few months before I went to that rehab was when I got arrested for the first time and caught possession charges and all that. I had been doing great at escaping the law up until that point. Did a little bit of time in jail, went to that rehab, everything. Got out, and just kind of went back to what I was doing. Had a warrant out, went back. Then in December of 2017, my brother and dad came and picked me up and took me to jail for my warrant that I had, had for like the last 8 months.
You went? You willingly went? Is this?
Well, they picked me up, and I mean, it wasn't like I was gonna run from them or something,
gotcha.
So I went and sat in jail for a couple months and got out again. And
so, what was that couple months like? Not getting drugs?
Well, I'd already been to jail like twice before then.
Okay.
All on the same charge. I've only ever caught one drug charge, and I've been to jail for it 4 times.
Okay.
The same charge, just warrants for not doing the 24/7 drug program that they put you on while you wait to be sentenced.
Okay.
And each time wasn't long. When I first went in, I did like 13 days because I got a PR bond, and it took me 13 days to pee clean for opiates, which is
13 days?
Which is supposed to be like 3 days.
I was going to say, it was like something like 48, 72 hours.
Yeah, I got my cell tossed a couple of times because they thought I was using it in there and stuff. It was different. But then I went back another time for like a week, and then
hold on, 18. I'm still my mind blown.
13 days, yeah.
13 days.
13
it was
days.
Still, you had so much in your system.
Yeah, 13 days.
Holy fuck, dude.
I couldn't believe it. I got a PR bond, and I was so jacked to be getting out. I had already been there like 4 days. I go take my drug test to get out, and they're like, "You're still dirty," and I'm like, "Oh shit." Well, tomorrow I'll be good for sure.
Right.
And it just went that way till day 13.
Holy fuck.
But yeah, so then my brother and dad took me to jail, sat in there a couple months, and yeah, I was miserable. And especially like I had only been to jail for a total of, like 3 weeks my whole life, like 13 days once and 7 days once. And, a couple months isn't long by any means.
Right.
But to somebody who's not really used to that lifestyle, like you even ask the guys that have done a lot of time in prison, those first couple times they were in jail sucked ass,
Definitely.
So I kind of made the best of it, though. It wasn't all that bad. Got out, went back to using, went back 2 weeks later on the same warrant again. And then 4 days after that, I got sentenced, and they gave me a year and a day prison suspended, and then 18 months supervised probation.
That seems a little lenient, but the court system, they were aware that this was an addiction issue, right? This was...
Well, my co-defendant actually got off better and had more charges, but I was arrested with like 3.2-ish grams of heroin.
So clearly personal use amount.
Well, a lot of places 3.2 grams, they're going to give you distribution.
Really?
I had a buddy that got, or not a buddy, but I know a guy who got busted with 0.4 grams and got distribution, which is unreal. But yeah, so I was arrested with a little over 3 grams, a scale, 100 empty bags, 9 spoons with residue, and 100 needles. And because of the bags and
Paraphernalia.
and scale, more than likely would have got distribution, especially since it was, over a gram.
Right.
Cop was cool, just gave me, possession of heroin paraphernalia. So I ended up, I probably would have got even like more lenient, but I kept fucking up the 24/7 thing. So I got a year and a day suspended and 18 months probation. And I go to probation, and the probation officer turns out to be a really good friend of mine, a really good golfing buddy from high school and college.
Oh, I thought you, when we were talking before, he was into golf and who you were, and that's how you became friends. But he knew you from way back in the day.
Yeah, we knew each other from way back.
Okay.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, so it was. And I think some people would consider that kind of awkward and not want to go through that. For me, it was great because, he knew me and everything. And at that point, I was.
It's got to be great because it kind of strengthens your support system, which you still
exactly.
need, even though this was an authority figure over you.
Well, right. Well, a lot
still
of people,
somebody you can bond with.
A lot of people don't look at their probation officer in a good light, I guess. And so for me, it was like I had a probation officer who I knew was going to actually try to do the best for me and, try to help me out in any way he can, not just be a dickhead and throw me back in jail anytime.
Which is another number, which unfortunately happens a
So
lot
I'm on probation and I go to treatment. And I made the mistake of I picked up like 2 grams before I drove to Minot to go to treatment. So I still had some left when I got there. Like any addict, I didn't throw it away. I brought it into the house. Got caught using 2 days later. Got kicked out. Called him. He was cool with it. But, and then the next week, I went to Center in Fargo, which is like a halfway house for people getting out of prison, but also a treatment center. I was one of the only people there that hadn't came from prison. So I went there and stayed there and did treatment there. And, I didn't go down there with drugs that time. I figured I'd do it right. And that was, March 30th, 2018. I've been clean since then. So,
did you have to do any of the what are the two, the methadone or Suboxone?
So I went down and I that was one of the big things was that I was on probation and I knew that I didn't want to go to prison and I knew that I didn't want to fuck up. But my whole life I had been taught abstinence only, like that you're not clean with either of those drugs, or if you take a Tylenol or whatever, you're not clean.
Right.
And when I went down there, I was really in the frame of I got to do whatever I can to stay off heroin and stay away from it, because otherwise, best case scenario, I'm going to prison. Worst case scenario, I'm going to die like my 3 closest friends. So I went and I got on methadone. And did that throughout my treatment and everything. I spent 3 months at Center and did treatment there. And then I got out and I decided to stick around in Fargo. And then I kind of got big into the recovery community there. I mean, not big in it, like working at a treatment center or anything like that. But I've seen a lot of people ask me why I don't, go the whole treatment center route or get a job at a treatment center. And that's great, but there aren't enough people working the other side of it with harm reduction. I will always push for anybody who's getting off drugs to be totally abstinent from everything, but not everybody's ready for that. And I know a lot of people shit on those two things, because a lot of like methadone clinics, like you got to go there every day and it can tie you down. But as long as you pass drug tests, it's urine privileges. So it's not, people will say that it's liquid handcuffs and, that's one of the worst things that you can do. But I have to disagree with that.
Okay. So now it's in the episode now, talking about your advocacy for harm reduction and what that entails.
Okay.
Yeah. Close out the episode with this.
So with getting on methadone, obviously, and being more on the harm reduction side and seeing how people kind of shit on it. That's really the side that I wanted to focus on, because people do, but it's just, it's nowhere near the treatment center abstinence only side of things go. And the way I look at it is, people will shame you if you want to hand out needles or Narcan to an addict, saying that you're enabling them. That's just totally not the case. An addict's going to use no matter what. And if you're the type of person that looks at somebody like they're a junkie because they use and they should just die anyway, then look at it more as an economic standpoint. There are countless people getting hepatitis C and HIV every day. It costs the state $84,000 to treat one person for hepatitis C.
Jeez.
Okay. To treat everybody in a year, that'd be $310 billion. The entire country's drug budget is $369 billion. So it makes no sense to me when I hear that argument. And that, to me, it's about keeping people alive until they're ready to be abstinent only, or whatever they're going to, whether they go and they're on Suboxone or methadone or, even use heroin for the rest of their life. If I can keep them alive and keep them safe and, maybe living a somewhat productive lifestyle, to me, that's a win, because I know every addict out there has a family that cares about them, and, nobody wants to go to a funeral. And I got to say, too, to anybody that's out there that, is looking for help or anything like that, in the Twin Cities area, there are a couple great places. I know on the harm reduction front, Valhalla Place, there's a great gal there that runs outreach for them called Stephanie DeVitch. They do group treatment, they do Suboxone, they do methadone, they do outreach services, giving Narcan and clean needles and stuff like that. And there are a million other great organizations in the city and all across the country that do that. But the one thing I'd like to say is most of the really good organizations you're going to find are normally state-run or nonprofits here and there. And same with the good rehabs. These rehabs that, like Passages Malibu and stuff like that, they're generally not that good. And if you're looking at, sending somebody to either a state-run facility in a ghetto neighborhood of Minneapolis or this place down in South Florida, do the state-run, just because the counselors at these places actually care. And then another phenomenal organization that I just think that everybody should check out. It's based out of Atlanta, Georgia. It's called Freedom to Grow. My friend Brett Bramble, he's walked across America twice for overdose awareness. Huh. He's got a bunch of great things coming up, developing his own treatment center in the hills of Georgia that's going to be like a wilderness retreat where you kind of, farm your own vegetables and, hike all the time. But anyway, absolutely phenomenal organization, phenomenal guy. If anybody has a minute, check out Freedom to Grow, or right now, if you want to throw a few bucks to him, his website is brettbramblewalks.com, and that'd be awesome there too. But
I'll put a link on that. Shoot me like a Facebook message with a link to that stuff, and when I post this episode, I'll make sure it's all linked into there to that.
All right.
Anything else you want to say before we go?
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate you letting me tell my story.
It's a powerful story, man. Thank you for sharing it.